Today is Wednesday, November 5th, and today we're going to be going over my Week 10 power rankings after the Week 9 games. Like usual, just going to get right into it. At number 32, I have the New York Jets. Now, fortunately, for 2 weeks in a row now, the Jets can say that their last game was a win. The unfortunate part is I still have them at number 32. I just think right now they traded both Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. There's a very good chance that their defense is going to look terrible to end the year, and they're going to be vying for the number one spot in the draft come 2026. Another team I have staying put from their Week 9 rank is the Tennessee Titans. Now, they lost to the Chargers this last weekend, and it was somewhat close, but never was really a doubt to that win for the Chargers over Tennessee. They're 1-7. They're one of the worst teams in the league. Really, the one bright spot the past month has been Chimere Dike. He's been in the kick return game, one of the best since the beginning of this year. He's kind of coming on now as a weapon on the offensive side of the ball. It's going to be interesting to see how this offense utilizes him going forward. At number 30, a team I have dropping one spot is the New Orleans Saints. They are 1-7 on the year after their loss to the Los Angeles Rams, and it was the start of the Tyler Shough era in New Orleans. Didn't get off to the best start, a 10-34 loss to the LA Rams. Shough did throw his first passing touchdown to Juwan Johnson in the red zone, and overall, you wouldn't say that he was overwhelmed, but there was a couple of drives in there where it definitely looked like things were moving a bit faster than he was expecting in his first career start. But again, it's kind of what was to be expected. This isn't a very good New Orleans Saints team to begin with, and putting in a rookie quarterback for his debut start against a really good Rams team, that's probably the result you're going to get 9 times out of 10. The Miami Dolphins lost to the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday Night Football. It was the first game back for Lamar Jackson in a long time, and he kind of picked up where he left off, especially against the Dolphins in his own personal history. I think he has more touchdowns against Miami than anyone else he's started against. There was some sort of stat about how he is just beaten up on Miami, through the air especially, too. So a tough loss for Miami, and they ended up not trading Jalen Waddle at the trade deadline, but they did trade Jalen Phillips. So a pretty clear sign that they're not going to fire sale the team and try to rebuild in season, but they're still looking towards the future and not really expecting much to come for the rest of this season. The New York Giants lost to the San Francisco 49ers. I have them dropping only one spot. I think this has been a pretty unlucky year for New York, and the thing that can only make it worse is if Jackson Dart ends up getting injured, which at the rate of amount of hits he's taking over the course of an NFL season, he's bound to get hurt for at least 1 or 2 games. So going forward, you'd love to see the Giants try to take care of him a little bit better and make sure he doesn't end up on the injury report. For the Las Vegas Raiders, they lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars by 1 point in overtime. It dropped their record to 2-6. I have them staying at the 27 spot. I think they got Brock Bowers back, and he put up a 3-touchdown performance. They feel good about how they played overall. The defense still is struggling, but if you're going to have a struggling defense, you want your offense to at least be able to put up points, and they finally did that this week. At 26, I have the Cleveland Browns. Now, they actually had a bye week this week, but they're going to the New York Jets, and that's kind of going to be like, I guess, an early sign of how each of these teams is trying to finish the year. Cleveland feels like one of those teams that still wants to try to compete. They still want to try to win games. They didn't make any trades. And I think they're still not a really great roster yet, but they're still one of the teams that they could rattle off a couple of wins, especially when they're playing the Jets this week. You could see them go up a little bit in these power rankings as the weeks go on, but this is probably where they belong at the moment. Cincinnati lost a barn burner against the Chicago Bears 47-42, and they really needed to be able to get just one stop. They had the lucky thing go their way. They recovered an onside kick. They scored 2 touchdowns in the span of, I think, less than a minute and a half. But still, with 57 seconds left, their defense allowed a touchdown very quickly, and it was poor all around. It seemed like a poor coverage showing. It seemed like a poor tackling showing. And it's just a tough look all around to see the offense put up 40 points like that and 2 touchdowns in the span of, like I said, less than a minute and a half. And you still lose that game. It's pretty tough. So I think the vibes are pretty low in Cincinnati right now. The Cardinals ended up beating the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football. Next week, they get the Seattle Seahawks. And they made a pretty clear decision to go with Jacoby Brissett even after Kyler Murray supposedly was supposed to be healthy after this week, but then there was another report that he's going to be out a month and a half, 2 months, and probably season-ending injury. But I think that was as clear a sign as ever that the Cardinals and Brissett feel comfortable with him in the lineup, and they're going to be a team that's a tough out down the stretch. At 3-5, they easily could rattle off 4 wins in 5 games and be right in the thick of it in terms of the playoff race. The Atlanta Falcons had another loss to the New England Patriots. This is 3 weeks in a row now that they've lost. And another team, I think vibes are pretty low right now. They felt great after beating the Bills. That was almost a month ago. And, you can really forget about that win now because these last 3 losses, I should say, when it was in San Francisco and you lost by 10, it was like, okay, that's disappointing, but that's a good team to lose to. But then you followed it up with a 24-point loss to Miami, and now this loss to the Patriots. It doesn't feel good right now to be the Falcons. The Washington Commanders lost to the Seattle Seahawks at home this last week. I have them dropping to number 21 in my rankings. At 3-6, and with the injuries that they've had, especially to Jaden Daniels, who now is going to be out another extended period of time with an elbow injury, it's just not looking good for the Commanders. They already have more losses this year than they did all of last year. And again, it's just not looking good. Now, the Dallas Cowboys, even though they lost to the Arizona Cardinals, they were clear buyers at the trade deadline. They acquired Quinnen Williams. I have them dropping a couple of spots after their loss to the Cardinals, but with this acquisition of Quinnen Williams, you think of it pretty highly for this defense. It was a clear need at the deadline to get some sort of help. They did also acquire Logan Wilson, so a clear indication that the Dallas Cowboys, they want to try to compete and make a playoff run. This was really the first week that their offense hasn't shown up, and this could be more of an outlier in terms of the performance they had against the Cardinals, but the hope is that going forward, the defense is going to be much better. The Houston Texans lost to the Denver Broncos. I have them dropping 3 spots to number 20 overall. CJ Stroud got hurt. I'm not really sure of the status for their next game against the Jaguars, but that's a pretty tough game, and if you're going into it without your starting quarterback, it's going to be tough to win that one. So I have them dropping. Just a pretty uneven year for the Texans. They're not really able to rely on much in the offense, and the defense is just playing lights out week after week, and you almost get surprised when they let up 1 or 2 touchdowns. And that's really all that happened in this game, and the Texans still lost. I have the Minnesota Vikings moving up 4 spots to number 19 after their win against the Detroit Lions. They get Baltimore next week, so I anticipate that the Vikings are probably going to drop, but if they surprise with a win next week against the Ravens, they're going to be at 5-4 and at looking like one of the underdog teams in the playoff run in the AFC. and the Baltimore Ravens after their win against the Miami Dolphins. I have them at 18. I had them at 20 last week, so a 2-point increase in the power rankings. You don't get a lot for beating Miami, but still at number 18. Baltimore is one of those teams, they just need to rattle off a good month, and they're right back in it, not only in the playoff race as a wild card team, but depending on how Pittsburgh has another month, like Baltimore is going to get, Baltimore could be within grasp of that first spot in the AFC North. So a team that's on the rise and could easily be at the top of their division very soon. The Carolina Panthers got a very impressive win against the Packers this week. I have them going up one spot to number 18. At 5-4, they have the New Orleans Saints at home next. They could be 6-4 and kind of staring down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the NFC South. It's going to be between those two teams, I kind of believe, especially after what we've seen from the Atlanta Falcons the last month. This looks like Carolina's division to kind of maybe go out and win. And Tampa Bay, they're hampered by injuries right now. I would love to see the Carolina Panthers try to make a run at the NFC South. The Chiefs, after their loss to the Buffalo Bills this last week. Now, this is a pretty common trend. The Chiefs lose to Buffalo in the regular season. But Kansas City's season as a whole right now just doesn't really lead you to believe that they're towards the top of the NFL anymore. I mean, their wins right now are against the Commanders with an injured Jaden Daniels not playing. You beat the Raiders and you beat the Giants and the Ravens when I believe Lamar Jackson wasn't playing in that game. You do have the win against the Lions, but that game was pretty controversial with some calls. So, I just think this season you can't really help but not feel good about the Chiefs right now. The Chicago Bears got a win against the Cincinnati Bengals, bringing them to 5-3. I have them staying at 15 in the power rankings. I don't think you really feel great about the win against Cincinnati. Yes, you put up 47 points, but you also allowed 42, and you allowed the Bengals to score multiple touchdowns after the 2-minute warning, one of which came after recovering an onside kick. So a little bit of things to clean up if you're the Bears, but still 15 is a pretty good spot to be in power rankings. 14, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. They beat the Las Vegas Raiders, and then they traded for the Raiders' top receiver, Jacoby Myers. He seems like he's going to fit in pretty well with Brian Thomas, and once he's back, Travis Hunter. This will give Trevor Lawrence in this offense 3 good receivers, a good tight end in Brenton Strange, and then a good running back in ETN. The hope is that this is the final piece to have this offense take off and become one of the elite ones. The LA Chargers beat the Tennessee Titans. They do lose Joe Alt in the process. It sounds like a possible, if not possible, it's a confirmed season-ending injury, surgery on his ankle. So a tough loss. The Chargers are going to be playing the rest of the season without either of their starting tackles. But they've built themselves a pretty nice cushion within the AFC in general. So they just need 4 more wins in their next 8 to get a playoff spot and have a pretty good team in the playoffs. And that's a pretty good thing to have. And I think the Chargers have that. At number 12, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have them bumping up 4 spots after their win against the Indianapolis Colts. They go to LA next week, and you have to feel really good about Pittsburgh. They beat the Indianapolis Colts. It's only the Colts' second loss all year. I had the Colts as the number 1 team in power rankings last week. You force 3 turnovers, or you force 3 interceptions off of Daniel Jones. You allow only 45 rushing yards to Jonathan Taylor. And you feel good about the offense. You feel good about the defense. You feel good about the special teams even. You feel really good about the Pittsburgh Steelers right now. And especially after that loss to the Packers, it just feels better to have this win. I have the Philadelphia Eagles at number 11. Their last game was 2 weeks ago. They had a bye in week 9. they get the Green Bay Packers this week, and that's going to be one of those games, especially as you'll see with my next team in the rankings, that's going to kind of decide who gets almost home field advantage, like in the playoffs once we come down to it. Because the Eagles, if they get this win over the Packers, not only in terms of standings does that help, but that gives you tiebreakers. It's a big game between those two teams. And the Eagles, I think, they're humming on all cylinders. The Packers, it seems like there's a few ways to kind of attack them and limit their offense, and we'll see if the Eagles can do it next week. The Packers at number 10 after another loss, this time to Carolina. And again, kind of like I said about the Philadelphia Eagles, this upcoming game for Green Bay, going against Philadelphia, it's going to not only decide a big spot in power rankings, but it's going to decide playoff positioning, and it's going to kind of change, I think, minds of people who are positive about either of these teams, depending on who loses. The LA Rams took care of the New Orleans Saints this week. They get the San Francisco 49ers next week. A pretty big divisional game for the Rams, to say the least. This is for playoff positioning. This is for division positioning. This is for just straight up bragging rights between these two teams. It's going to be a great matchup next week. And again, pretty big for power rankings, I think, that matchup next week. Gonna kind of decide who I think is maybe even a top 5 or top 3 caliber team. San Francisco beat the New York Giants this last week to move to 6-3 and keep up in the race, I should say, with Seattle and LA. And again, this next game against the LA Rams for the Niners, it's going to go a long way in deciding this division and how I feel about both teams in power rankings. The Detroit Lions lost the Minnesota Vikings this last weekend. I have them dropping 5 spots to the number 7 spot. Just a tough loss, I think, in general. I think the Lions are fine. It's not like it's one of these losses where the sky is falling and we got to figure out what's wrong with the Lions. I think they just had a tough game against a team who got their starting quarterback back in the lineup, and they have a really good offense in Minnesota. So it's not like it's something that should be taken lightly. But again, I think the Lions overall are going to be fine. The Indianapolis Colts, after losing to Pittsburgh, I have them at number 6, dropping from that number 1 spot I had them at last week. But the big news of today, they shocked the NFL media world by trading for Sauce Gardner. And that gives them a pretty good 1-2-3 punch with Gardner, Kenny Moore, and Charvarius Ward in that cornerback room. They have a good defense now in both the pass and against the run. And they have what seems like a full defense now. This felt like the last piece to try to make their championship run. I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers staying at number 5. They have a home game against the New England Patriots this week. A game that's obviously going to be very good for power rankings, as you'll see with my next few selections here. Tampa Bay, this was a good week for them to have off. They needed to get a little bit healthier. They needed just, I think, a little bit of rest, and it's going to get them ready for their stretch run here in this last month or so. The Buffalo Bills got a big win against the Kansas City Chiefs at home. Next week, they have the Miami Dolphins, and I really hope that this isn't gearing us up to have a really disappointing week for Buffalo. They just had possibly the win of the week, win maybe even of the season for Buffalo against Kansas City. If they follow it up with a disappointing loss in Miami next week, it's going to feel really terrible. But right now, everything feels great, and the hope is that you're going to take care of Miami next week, be at 7-2, and look pretty healthy in the playoff race. Possibly the most surprising team through 2 months of the NFL season is the Seattle Seahawks, sitting at 6-2. They just took care of the Washington Commanders. They get the Arizona Cardinals at home next week, and a pretty surprising start. They trade for Rashid Shaheed, which I don't think was a move we really saw coming. And kind of like I said about like the Colts defense getting Sauce Gardner, to maybe a less extent, getting Rashid Shaheed, the hope is that this now with him, JSN, and Cooper Kupp, good tight ends with Arroyo and Barner, and good running backs with Walker and Charbonnet, that this is the championship offense around Sam Darnold. And we're going to see this team be even better to finish the season. The Denver Broncos got a walk-off win against the Houston Texans, and next week they get the Las Vegas Raiders. Depending on how the number 1 team plays next week against Tampa Bay, which is a bit of a spoiler, but there's a chance Denver is number 1 next week. They're playing the Las Vegas Raiders at home. That could be a blowout early. If it's a convincing enough win, you could even see them in the number 1 spot next week. They've been playing really well offensively, and defensively they've played great as well. At number 1, I have the New England Patriots. A new face, I guess, with the same name. It's Drake May leading this team instead of Tom Brady. At 7-2, the win against the Falcons this week, if they are able to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're going to have a pretty firm stance in this number 1 spot. I think even for a while. They have been really impressive, especially after that home loss to start the year against the Raiders. They're 7-1 after that game, and they've beaten the Bills. Last week they beat the Falcons. They just have played a really good brand of football, and I have them at number 1. That's going to be the video. I appreciate if you have made it to the end of this video. This is over 21 minutes long, which I think is ridiculous. I shouldn't have let it get this long in the first place, but if you made it to the end, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like this video, make sure you comment what I got wrong or right about your favorite team or any of the other teams that I talked about, and I'll see you in the next video.